seconds away for you to start, Jen. The stream is live, 30 seconds away. About 15 away, stand by. In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You're up, Jen. Go for it.
I'm Jennifer Rooks, and welcome everybody to Maine Public's All Books Considered Book Club. A bit of housekeeping. We want to thank all of our sponsors for making this possible. And also, if you've already sent in a question, thank you. But it is not too late. You can go onto our YouTube channel or Facebook and send in a question for Susan Conley there. If the discussion inspires a question, go ahead and put it in during the discussion, or you can put your question in now. Of course, our guest tonight, Susan Conley, the author of several books, but tonight we are talking about her most recent, Landslide. Susan, it's so fun to see you. Thank you so much for participating, and thank you for writing Landslide. I know I'm a huge fan of yours and just loved the book.
Oh, thank you so much, Jennifer. It's truly thrilling to be here in Maine talking about this book that's so dear to my heart about Maine.
Well, and you know, when I read it, I think I've sent you an email. But first of all, I feel as though I know Jill, and I was having conversations with her, and I'm sure a lot of the audience felt the same way. And I also, we'll probably talk about this a little bit, sometimes got a little frustrated with her. But I want to just sort of go back to the beginning. Where did she come from? Is she someone you know?
So this is one of those novels that is meant to read super autobiographical and isn't at all. So no, I don't know Jill. I wanted to write about this Maine woman, though, that lived on this island and had all kinds of pressures put on her. And I wanted to see how she'd react to those pressures. And she's an amalgamation of a lot of different Maine women that I know and admire and I'm curious about. And she came into my life and I just went with her for a good year.
How do you feel about her?
Oh, I love all my characters, really. I mean, I feel like some part of me is in each character. I know that sounds sort of cliche, but it's really true. So Jill, I thought she had a huge amount of pressure for about 3 weeks in this novel. And, you know, she had the kind of obvious pressures on her, pressures around, could they keep the boat? Could they survive? Was her husband loyal? How was this marriage going to survive? But I think for me, the most important question I was asking, and I'm a very big question asker, sort of these sort of framing questions drive me, was would she be able to hold on to the connection she had with her boys? And I would say particularly with Sam, because I was very, very interested in that life of a teen boy in this novel and really kind of demystify it and also play against some of the tropes and the reductive stereotypes that we all hear about teenage boys.
It's interesting you say the question I had at the end. So does that mean that you didn't go into the novel trying to answer the questions, but instead you finished the novel and found the question?
Right. Or the questions, right? I mean, I'm such a believer in the iterative process of it all and how we write into it. So I love to ask really seminal, kind of obvious questions, and then see if they can deepen and deepen and deepen. And I hold those questions, like they're around me when I'm writing. I use them as kind of engines. And they provide like a frame for what I call emotional curiosity, because I'm really interested in that. And then that idea of causality. So, oh, Sam is struggling. Yeah, he smokes pot. A lot of kids smoke pot, right? But what's really going on with Sam? You know, what is this legacy of what I call grief, legacy of grief or trauma that's kind of hounding him, and why the heck can't he talk about it?
So I'm going to ask you one question, I think, Susan, that's coming in from one of your listeners, and then maybe have you read a passage. But this is such a great question to kick everything off that I'm going to start here. This is from Jim, who writes from Booth Bay. When I finished Landslide, I thought, quote, there are no evil characters here, and none that you would call saints. This is just life. Do you think that's accurate?
I love that. Yeah, I love that. I mean, to write a book about being on the coast of Maine, trying to survive as a commercial fishing family, God, if it could just be life. I think that was one of my biggest worries, was to romanticize it or reduce it. This is the Maine that I grew up in. I'm fourth generation mid-coast Maine. And I didn't grow up in fishing, but I grew up all around fishing. So I took my time to come to this book. I mean, this book is sort of near and dear to me in many ways. And I wanted to get it right. And yeah, flawed characters, right? And I think, I did this really exciting event, Jennifer, with one of my great heroes, writers, Judy Bloom. And she opened up the night by saying, I have hope for this family. Am I correct? Can we have hope for this family? And I said, yeah, I think we can have hope for this family. I have hope for this family.
Oh my gosh. It's so funny that you took time coming to this book and that you took time to coming home. I mean, you wrote a book about Paris, France, set in Paris, France, before you wrote a book about a small town on the coast of Maine.
Oh, I even wrote, let's think about it. I wrote 2 books about China. I wrote a memoir about China.
That's right.
Boys. And then I wrote a novel about a mother. And then I sort of tried to trick myself. I wrote about raising girls as an outsider in China. And all the while I was thinking, can I write a book about teenage boys? I happen to have 2 of the species, 2 of the boy teenage species. And I have notes. Jennifer, I'm a huge journaler and believer in lots of different sort of places to put our ideas for our books, right? And none of it's linear. It's super circular and messy for a good while. So I know there are writers out there, and I just want to make sure there's no wrong way to do this. But I do laugh to myself, because when I opened up some of these notebooks and I started looking at what I had written, I had this line. I wrote, I think I could write a memoir about parenting teenage boys, preteen and teen boys, day in the life kind of stuff. I could do that. Not sure if my boys would let me. And then I wrote, I think not. And that was the end of that. No memoir.
So have the boys read it?
The boys have not read it. They know that it's about teenage boys. They want to keep their distance for a little while. I say, because I call the teenage boys in this book wolves, and I say that literally hundreds of wolves have come through my house in the last 20 years here in Portland. And this book, Sam and Charlie, are the greatest hits of all the wolves that have come into my house. But my boys are wonderfully supportive of my writing life, but I think they're going to wait on the book.
Oh, that's great. I love that they have decided not to touch it. I wonder if any of their friends have read it.
I actually think so. There is some proof of that. So far, so good too. Reports are good. Okay. Apparently it's accurate, because you can't get teenage boy wrong. If you get it wrong, I think you really have a big problem on your hands.
Well, as promised, how about a passage?
Oh, okay. So we'll do the wolves. We'll do teenage boys. We'll just start right at the opening, because this is where the novel actually revealed itself to me. Tiny bit of context: driving up to Wiscasset, listening to Fleetwood Mac on the radio. And I have this joke in my family that you can't go a day without hearing Fleetwood Mac on the radio in Maine. And I love Fleetwood Mac, but my kids maybe don't love it quite so much. So the book was kicking around in my head. I knew that this family would be isolated somehow. and they'd be on the coast. I was starting to think they'd need to be on an island. And I had an island in mind that was a tiny speck of an island that I grew up looking at. But I didn't know who these boys were yet. And I knew they would be brothers. And then I was listening to Fleetwood Mac, and I pulled over and I actually wrote most of this little passage that I'm going to read. And then I knew I had the book. It's late afternoon at the end of a long October when the Fleetwood Mac song comes on. We're halfway down the peninsula, and I tell the wolves, I was raised on Stevie Nicks. So could they please let me listen to the whole thing? Because Sam, the younger one, has a bad habit of changing the station. Mom, he says in his deadpan and stares out the cracked windshield. I already knew that about you growing up on Stevie Nicks. He's 16 and gangly with poking collarbones like little car door handles. He wants to be a professional basketball player, but will settle for rock musician. His face has grown long and gaunt, so he doesn't look like himself, but the person he's in the process of becoming. I tell myself it's a beautiful face. It's important to tell myself that many things about teenage boys are beautiful, so I don't panic. Every time I turn on the radio, Sam says in his most sarcastic voice, it's Stevie the Good Witch of the West Nicks. The thing is, Mom, I don't want to grow up in Maine on Fleetwood Mac like you did. And I'll stop there. But then I had Sam. And I actually skipped a tiny bit there because I really wanted to get his zinger in there, where he gets her on the end of, that's the end of page 1. And I think for me, Jennifer, the key line there was, I tell myself there are many things about teenage boys that are beautiful, so I don't panic. And then I started to understand the kind of moment that Jill was in with these wolves, and the great intimacy they had, and also the banter, and also this sort of sometimes sort of battle lines. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fantastic writing, Susan.
Oh, thank you.
Terry from Augusta writes, I thought it interesting that it was men against the women to some extent here. Jill was up against the absent husband, the boys, the judgmental father-in-law. Was Jill living in a man's world and just couldn't escape? Did she want to?
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's funny because she is up against Jimmy. Jimmy is her kind of cantankerous and I think wonderful father-in-law. May we all have a Jimmy in our lives. And on my book tour, which was mostly on Zoom, but I got to meet all kinds of wonderful people around the country, and almost everybody had a Jimmy in their lives who told it sort of straight and also could be vexing. But really, I think Jill is deeply aligned with the wolves, with her boys. She's just trying to kind of see them through this moment. So I don't really see her against boys or men at all. I see her kind of as someone who actually really understands them and knows when to play her cards. That's what I grew to really respect about Jill, is she actually holds her cards a lot and then plays them when things are really tough. But she gives them the boys quite a wide bandwidth. So yeah, I think she's understanding how to speak boy, and they're also always growing to understand her.
This is from Jennifer in New Gloucester. What a wonderful read. I am curious if you have heard from any readers themselves living along the coast and living the sea life, if they feel you captured their life experience accurately. Did you ruffle any feathers?
Oh, thank you for that question. So such an insightful question, because yeah, I come from this place. I wanted to write a love letter to it. And I also wanted to sound some alarms about the state of commercial fishing. I wanted to put a spotlight on it and say, hey, is everybody aware that we have a wildly dwindling fleet here in Maine? And I wanted to get it right. And you know, I have only been incredibly moved by what I've heard from readers. Yeah, I've even heard from women who write and say, I am Jill. I've heard from several women who say, I am Jill, and that is my life. And you got it right. And thank you, thank you, thank you. And those emails were truly better than any review, truly. So that's probably been the most heartening thing. And the conversation around the mid-coast Maine and fishing, and that's gone on. Landslide has allowed me to be part of some other conversations when storytelling seems like a really good sort of vehicle to talk about some of these issues that can sometimes be harder to get into. But yeah, I love that question. Thank you.
I bet it was a little scary too. To be writing about something that was so personal, and you wanted to be respectful and you wanted to be authentic, but to be authentic, you have to be a little raw and you have to expose some things that, you have to hang some dirty laundry.
Yeah, well, you're so right. You have to, be emotionally honest, right? So, things come to me when I'm writing a novel that feel like they've come from some sort of, I'm joking here, but some sort of divine ordinance or something. Like, I have this feeling, and I talk about this a lot when I teach, that when we're writing a book, we kind of put our radar on and we receive all news from, outer space. All news gets funneled through our book radar, and suddenly everything feels pertinent to the book. So there was a moment where I was walking with a friend of mine, and she's a family therapist, and I was talking about my kids. And then suddenly she was telling me how great it was that, so-and-so was sex positive. And I said to myself, what does being sex positive even mean? I felt ancient here in my 50s. And I learned that it was this wonderful movement, right, around like families not shaming people about their bodies and such. And I thought, oh, perfect. I'm giving that to Lara, Jill's best friend. And Lara is kind of this wonderful shadow in the book. I love Lara because she keeps Jill on this sort of more on the cutting edge. Lara is on the cutting edge. She lives in Portland. She has a vibrant art career, and she's talking to the kids because she's a teacher at an art college. And so then sex positivity came into the book because it came to me through my antennae being open. And similarly, I interviewed a lot of fishermen for this book, wonderful people that are incredibly hardworking people, kind of holding on to the tradition. And that was deeply moving to me, to realize, oh, we've gone from, 300 boats to 100 boats to 50 to 20. And, oh, here's one of the last standing. So hearing from them that I also got it right was huge for me. Yeah.
Here's a question from Carolyn and Trenton. I found Landslide to be such an engaging book that I read it twice, gaining insight into the political and economic aspects of the Maine fishing industry, the multi-generational nature of the fishing lifestyle, and their impacts on this particular family were eye-opening for me. Nettie draws out key threads in the family dynamics in the final section of the novel in ways that were foreshadowed earlier, especially regarding Kit and Sam. One thing that I questioned was why the author chose not to have Nettie help Jill face some uncomfortable truths. Also, particularly her lying to the boys about their father's condition and her intrusive parenting style. Just one example of the former. It would have been easier on everyone and saved a lot of disappointment for the boys if Jill had truthfully explained the seriousness, of Kit's infection instead of allowing the boys to expect that their father might be able to return home from the hospital that weekend. I was surprised that Nettie dealt with Kit's and Sam's issues, but not with Jill's.
So interesting. Yeah. So here's the thing about fiction. We need these conflicts. I mean, we need to have these discrepancies and these glitches and these sort of wonderings, because if we if we allowed everything to sort of be tied up, then we wouldn't have the grit, we wouldn't have the tension. And in some ways, everything is what it is in this kind of realistic novel, but it also is also standing in for other larger themes, right? So why does Jill downplay the infection? Well, I mean, I can say right now, I know her pretty well. I think she felt so much pressure coming from different sides. And she didn't want Sam to kind of, spiral away. And so she did that protecting thing. And it provided some really interesting fallout later. I love when Sam calls Jill out on her lying. And I've always been amazed how kids can tell when parents aren't really telling the truth. And it can just be a tonal thing. And Sam just really landed on it so quickly. And I really enjoyed writing that because I personally loved the humor that Sam and Charlie would bring sometimes to the conversation with their mom. And I have to say that really my most gratifying readership experience has been the lot of moms of teenage boys have written me and said, how did you write my life? How did you know my life? And sort of them taking a lot of solace in the humor and the banter and the knowing. There's that line early on where Jill says, sometimes my son's silence in the car is flammable. And that could be girls or boys. Please know, I chose boys. I've heard from a lot of teenage moms of girls too, that they live in this place as well. A little bit of a high wire act for a while. But I loved that idea of flammability and silence and how Jill will have to mediate it and just deal with it. So maybe she lied because of that. I mean, comes back to that great comment earlier about flawed humans, right? Flawed characters. And then Nettie, we could talk about that for a long time. I mean, I wonder if she had her hands full and her focus was Sam, and then she picked up on all this trauma that Kit had, and maybe she just had to leave Jill alone for then. But my hope is that they were going to keep seeing Nettie, and that a lot more was going to come out. That would be my hope.
Yeah, I love your analysis of teenagers. Mine are just out of teenagerdom. They're 23 and 20, but I just, oh boy, are they sharp? Are they tuned in and sharp and acerbic and funny and everything. You're right. And the silence being flammable. What a great line. This is from Phoebe. Do you think of ideas or specific phrases and jot them down and then find a way to fit them into your prose once you're writing? If yes, how do you keep them organized? 2 great examples struck me. Page 180. Quote, remember when we had powers? I said once to Lara when the boys were babies and I'd escaped to Portland. If you mean sexual power, we never had any. None. It just felt like we did. Page 181. Motherhood had given me somewhere to put all the love I felt inside me. I hadn't known I'd been looking for a place to put all the love.
Oh, well, thank you for taking me to 2 of my favorite parts of the book. Gosh, what a great reading. Because those are what I would call maybe little pieces of gold, little nuggets. And you're right, I stealthily slid them in there. So what I would say about those is that they became kind of more than just even quotes for me. They became frames. They became portals into exploring ideas of power. And so then I'm kind of always looking at Jill and Lara and seeing who has power, who doesn't. It's underneath. You may not notice it as the reader, but that idea of power and women's power. And, there's some time where Jill is working at that little recording studio in Portland, and she's the only girl, but, nobody is forcing her to smile. all the time, but when she worked as a waitress, her boss was really hard on her and was always making her smile. And, you know, you can start to see that I was always investigating that idea of power, women's power. And then the motherhood and the love, hugely interested in that in the book, right? And really looking at Laura did not have children. Jill did. Why? And when she said that, I knew that I had landed on something important. So you ask how I organized them. And I do just want to show you like stacks of these things, right? I like different ones for different reasons. Like this one I thought was interesting for our purposes because this one was called Notes on Boy Life, which makes me laugh now. I mean, this is probably 3 or 4 years old, but here it is. And it's handwritten and it has little thoughts, little ideas about boy life and sort of what's going on actually in my house that makes me think more about other boy characters. I'm seeing words like they are insistent and relentless. And then I'm chronicling a rock song that one of my boys was playing a lot on the guitar. He went through a phase where he played Here Comes the Sun over and over. All of that feeds into my character building. Here's another smaller journal. And this one says, really, and this is like right out of, I mean, I'm just reading it. Tension, tension, all in caps, right? And then here's a note: real issues of being being a woman. What the heck does that mean, right? But it mattered to me at the time. Boys, and being cool and love and sex. Okay, there's a talisman for me to move forward. So it looks really unorganized, but what I typically do is I fill one of these and then I go on to the next and then the next. And then what I do actually, just to get really nitty gritty, is I cull the notebooks. And when I cull them, I actually go through and then I bring all the handwritten stuff out and I type it on the computer. And then I have this need to actually strike the page with a pen and sort of go through that page. That page is done now. And I do that again and again. So how's that for a non-organized, organized system?
Well, I like it. And I think that I'm wondering if you're doing it because you're an author and you're going to, some of these bits are going to make their way in some magical way into a novel and someone's going to say something or it's going to be some magical description. But I'm wondering also as a human being, Susan, and as a mom of boys, does it help you to get some of this down on paper? And do you feel better after going through one of these episodes if you've been able to write about it a little bit in one of your journals?
Oh, yeah. You know, I'm a huge believer in the power of story, right? I mean, the obvious sort of catharsis, but also the delight and the fun of writing and distilling things down with language. I love language. I sort of devour language. I came to writing through poetry, really, and through the gift of having wonderful teachers where I grew up in Woolwich, Maine, who allowed us to do creative writing. You know, this was back in the 70s. What a gift! What an amazing thing! And so I love sentences on a language level, and I think you're right. I think Jennifer, it's helping to articulate something when we write it down. You know, I think the power of journaling, the power of writing, any kind of hybrid writing, you name it. I think we have learned how incredibly powerful it can be for all of us. So I tend to move, and I'm curious if other writers do this that are with us tonight, but or artists of any kind, or anyone who's doing any kind of project. I'll think that I'm just journaling, but really I'm already building a scene for my book. So I'll move quickly into character and I'll leave real life behind really fast. And I will say that that's because now I primarily write fiction, although I still do write essays. And I came into my writing career through a very personal memoir. So I know the feeling of writing purely personally and then just taking it right into the book. But, you know, I wrote my memoir when I was 40, and I had a lot to say about having kids and feeling like an outsider, and also like fascinated with China, the country we were in that book, and also with disease. And then I felt like, well, there's a memoir at 40. You know, how lucky am I? And who gets to do that again? So I better move on to fiction. And so that's what I've done ever since. So my journaling is usually truly a vehicle to help me land on my characters and their motivations.
So Susan, what about another passage? Do you have two prepared?
You got it. Yeah, let's do it. Let's see. Okay. This is one of those moments, or what are we on here? We're on page 50-ish. And, you know, always trying to keep the movie camera on Maine in this book and where we are, and letting the reader see this Maine that I love so much. And then also always being aware of the pace and the interiority of the characters, right? So I can't just have a love letter to Maine. So you'll see me here trying to weave in the sort of visuals. They're going to go down to the dock. They're going to go to school. And the mom, Jill, has just found out that Sam has posted this photo of him smoking a joint on Instagram, right? Our dock sits in a tiny cove near the point of the spear, protected from currents and tides by the rock ledges. To get down to it, we have to take the wooden ramp Kit built over the rocks and go past the wild rose bushes and sumac and cedar scrub. The Duchess won't start again today, but Sam keeps pulling on the engine rope until I'm sure he's flooded it. I live in a police state, he says. The way you're always watching me. That should be illegal, Mom, for you to go on my Instagram. I'm up in the bow where I want to remind him not to flood the engine again, and that years ago he let me follow him on Instagram, but I stopped myself from saying anything. We had another killing frost last night, but the potatoes are all dug now and the gardens are covered with seaweed. I'm not afraid of the cold. If anything, I'm afraid of Sam because he isn't in control of himself anymore now that his father's gone. Your dad almost died. This is what I told the boys when I first explained the accident to them. Your father almost died in the boat fire. I told them this because it's true, and also so that the boys would remember to be nicer to me. I don't really mean that. I told them so they could understand how serious things were. I read an article in Kit's hospital room last week about a painter in Los Angeles named Laura Owens, who had a retrospective at the Whitney in New York at the age of 47. My mother always told me the whole world was waiting for me, and in this way I was not one of the girls whose appetite was taken away. But who gets a Whitney retrospective at 47? The question for me is how to survive on the island with the boys and remain chill. The question blows up almost every day. Candy says you wait it out and the boys come back to you. She says it can take maybe 5 years. I don't know if I can wait that long. Laura Owens kept a journal in her 20s called How to Be the Greatest Artist in the World, with a 14-point checklist with things like think big on it and do not be afraid of anything and say very little. I've decided to try to implement the say very little concept as a new communication strategy with the wolves. My hope is that by withholding, I'll receive signs that my little boys are in there behind the faces of the imposters. And I'll stop there.
So Susan, this is the kind of thing a lot of women have said to you they can relate to, right? This kind of thinking.
Who are those people? Those are not my children.
This is when you need a room full of people in real life and not on Zoom, so you can see everybody nodding and smiling.
Who abducted them?
Oh my goodness. Catherine from South Portland says, how does one come up with a title for the book? Is it hard? How did you come to call the novel Landslide? Was it your idea or somebody else's? I'm adding the last part. Was it your idea or somebody else's?
Okay, so for the Fleetwood Mac fans out there, it might be kind of obvious that this is the Stevie Nicks, this is her greatest anthem, Landslide. So I actually kind of stealthily refer to the song on the first page. And there's some references to Fleetwood Mac that come up again in the book. And so then I decided, gosh, Landslide. I love the song, right? And I love the nostalgia of that song for Maine, because like I said, I grew up in the 70s in Maine, and basically I grew up on Fleetwood Mac, like literally. It was the anthem or soundtrack of my life in the woods in Woolwich, because my parents happened to have very good music taste. And so I grabbed it, and then it became a metaphor for so many things in the book. So this is the thing I love about writing, that I'm sure you all love too. And that's why you love books, and is that one thing can mean so many things, right? So suddenly we have this frame of a landslide, and then I can apply it to all these things in the book. A landslide of climate change in Maine, landslide of warming water, landslide of huge financial changes in the fishing industry, landslide of change going on for hormonal teenage boys, landslide in the marriage, and on and on. You can really kill that metaphor if you want. You can bludgeon it. But I thought it was really fun to take the Fleetwood Mac song and do that. And there were a few contenders for the title. And then this wonderful dialogue starts between my literary agent and my editor. And she's been my beloved editor for all my books at Knopf. And we kind of all feel each other out, and we try out different things. And we kept coming back to Landslide. There was a moment where we tried pulling a line of dialogue from the boys. I was very smitten with a line that Sam says early on where Jill is singing. And he says, I'm going to get it kind of wrong, but he says basically, please don't sing like that. Please just sing normally. And I love that line, because that's it, right? Like Jill's just singing. She's not doing anything weird, but there's that time, and all kinds of moms have told me, boys or girls, it doesn't matter. There's a time where the mom can't get it right in the eyes of the child. And I love that time. It's a really awkward time. Everybody's unsure. The children love the mom still. They're devoted, but they can't bear to see her sing like that. So we tried that. We tried Please Just Sing Normally. And I would say that was the number 2 choice. I thought it was fun, but what do you think, Jennifer?
I don't know. I don't think it's quite right.
Yeah, it's not like, it doesn't have enough gravitas, right? It doesn't have enough. Yeah.
From Amy in Augusta, are there any novelists who inspired her when writing this book or writing in general? What authors does she love? Okay, we just have a couple minutes for this because we have other questions. So you can spend an hour listing authors.
You got it. I know so many. Here, I happen to be looking at a stack of books that I have that are propping up my computer. And I'm seeing White Teeth by Zadie Smith. I love Zadie Smith. And I'm seeing a book called The Lost Children Archive by Valeria Luiselli. I loved that book. A mom, a dad, 2 kids on the road, driving across America. That was probably a big impetus for me, that book. Lots of dialogue with the parents and the children. I could go on and on. I mean, so many books. I will say that I have a favorite writer that really did inspire this book, and I'm going to get her name wrong. I always get it wrong, but Tove Hansen, I will call.
Oh, yeah. A lot of people
right?
Whenever we do a Maine calling on favorite books, that name comes up. So
I think I was obsessed with it when we did one last year, and I remember I was so big on the summer book her summer book, but I just love her. And there's a line, and these are her letters, and I just wanted to read it. It says, I'm thinking a lot about how hard it is to make art, and above all, how hard it is to get started. And I just thought, there's so many great letters in this collection, but I love this idea that for all of us, yeah, it is hard. It's hard to get started.
Takes courage.
Yeah.
From Joanne, great story about family issues. I found the background of the ocean reflects that each event is a big wave of life. I expected the end to be a tsunami, but once again, the family slid over the top and over the backside.
Oh, that's so cool. You know, what a cool comment when you think about the cover, right? And all that water that I think is a little bit menacing and also alluring, that water. Yeah, so a tsunami at the end, I don't think that felt real to me, getting back to this idea of just real humans, flawed humans. What felt real to me was the surprising discoveries going on in Nettie's little office. I think when I wrote my way into that, and when I saw that Kit was going to have to face the fact that he actually hated living in his house because his mother had died there, I suddenly saw that there really was hope for this family, and that there was going to be a whole lot more to come for this family. Yeah. So, you know, I don't think I gave it a Hallmark happy ending, but yeah, there is no tsunami in the end. Just a lot of communication, I think, yet to come.
Lance at Bangor, what was it like having your novel turned into an audiobook? How does that work? Do you have any input? Have you ever listened to it all the way through?
So I get to choose between like 3 wonderful actresses. And this is kind of funny. I picked the same woman unknowingly, who I had picked for Elsie Come Home, my previous novel. And you would have thought I would have remembered that, but it was COVID. It was crazy times to be publishing a book, and I did not. And I have not dared listen. I think I would really want to get out my pen and like edit when I listened, but I have, and I'm trying. I mean, I say this with great modesty, please, but people have been very kind about the audio. People really like the audio. They say she does a great job. She's not overly dramatic. And so I'm very happy with it, but that's how it goes. You get to choose, or I've been lucky enough to choose from some wonderfully talented folks. Yeah.
Lisa writes on our YouTube channel, please tell me what's behind Jill's bad haircut. What is it telling us?
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Jill has dyed her hair herself. She's on an island. I think I was interested in exploring a woman that had no like avenue to vanity, really. Like she really was, it was austere out there. And even her little hopes of kind of keeping up with the times were tricky, right? Like she'd try, but then it wouldn't really work out. I just really love that about her. And then she has her very stylish friend, Lara, who's about to evacuate her from the island if she keeps wearing bad jeans.
Barbara, also from the YouTube channel, have you read Elena Ferrante's The Lying Life of Adults? How would the story in Landslide evolve if written by Sam or Charlie?
Oh, that's so interesting. So that's the Ferrante that I haven't read yet. Days of Abandon I've read, and I read the longer series. Such a good question. Ferrante has a kind of fierceness, right? And she's so good on women's friendship and what's allowed, and betrayal. She's so good on betrayal. So those issues didn't come up as much in this book for me. But if Sam had written this book, I think it would be wildly funny. I would hope it would be like a really good David Sedaris book.
Adam in Portsmouth asks, any chance this becomes a screenplay? And who would she like to play a few of her characters and why?
Oh God, wouldn't that be fun? There has been interest, but there's often interest. There has been some from LA. Oh, and my God, my friend and beloved cinematographer Sean Misha did make an incredible 5-minute or 7-minute sort of trailer movie for the book that sits on my website that is really cool. We have live actors playing Sam and Charlie, and we have Jill as an actress, writer friend of mine, and it's a really cool little movie. So that actually really excited me about a longer movie. God, who would play Jill? This is where I wish we were all sitting in a room together, having snacks, and we could go around and we could all throw out an idea. Maybe Julianne Moore, would she be good? Who knows?
I like that.
Okay.
Well, Susan Conley, before we go, I was just thinking that I kind of wish I'd started with this, but I want to take us back a couple of years because I actually ran into you one day in Wiscasset. Maine Calling had gone live from Camden, and we stopped, Cindy Hahn and Mark Simpson, our news director, and myself, we stopped in Wiscasset on our way back, and we ran into you and Lily King, and you guys were out together celebrating that you had each just finished a novel, and it was this novel, wasn't it? It was Landslide.
Isn't that wild? Yeah, I remember.
Isn't that a wild small world?
It was so fun. It was I remember we were all in really good moods. Remember?
Yeah. and how we would never have imagined what the world would have come to it. I'm putting ourselves back into that moment. I remember it was a beautiful day, and we were in this lovely stationery shop, and it all just seems so like one of those wonderful Maine moments when you run into somebody you haven't seen in a while, and I was so thrilled to be running into these two famous authors that I know, and you were both in such a good mood, and
we were giddy. And you know what's wild is that, I kid you not, I'm sure I bought this journal there and this one, so we've come full circle, Jennifer.
Oh my goodness. Well, Susan, congratulations so much. And thank you for taking part in the All Books Considered Book Club. I hope that all of you listening tonight enjoyed this as much as I did. And I have to ask you, are you working on something else already?
I am. I've shifted. I've left the wolves, and you might have heard me interested in Ferrante. I'm really going deep on women now, women and friendship. So I'm having some fun with that. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I am so grateful to be here. And I'm such a fan of Maine Public and such a fan of Maine Calling. And of you. So enormous gratitude to you and your team.
Well, it's just been a wonderful treat to have you. And thanks to everybody who signed up for the All Books Considered Maine Public Book Club. Will be back in 2 months. Our next book is on the shelf right there behind me. Gregory Brown's debut novel, The Lowering Days. Good night, everybody.